Hey, everybody, don't adjust that dial. We're going to bring our special guest on here shortly. We're just going to jump right to it tonight. So I've got to get a couple of things going here. Normally, I play a video at the beginning so that I can share out to people, but we got so much stuff to talk about tonight and so much content to discuss that I wanted to just save as every second possible. So without further ado, our special guest and co-host, formerly the guitarist, frontman for Triumph, veteran musician, guitarist, vocalist, author, teacher, Canada's Walk of Fame, Canada's Music Hall of Fame, Order of Canada recipient, Rik Emmett, author of 10 Telecaster Tales. Hey, Rik.
Hello.
Awesome to have you on the show tonight.
Thank you. Welcome to the south end of Eli's loft, which looks like a guitar store.
How big is Eli's loft? How is it?
Do you want me to give you the tour? Here we go.
Yeah, you can give us a tour.
There's the stained glass window, and there's my library, and then we go up the stairs and into Eli's loft, and there's Eli on the wall, and the recording desk is over in that corner, and my writing desk is around the corner in that other side of the room. And so now we're gonna behind this mirrored door is all my guitar case storage, and you're back. It was the 360 tour.
So is Eli an actual carousel horse?
Yeah, from the turn of the century, last century, and then it had been dipped and stripped, which was sort of, the decorator that was doing our house had sort of recommended it. And then I cut off 2 of his legs so that we could hang him. We had a big central staircase in our old house. And when we moved here, I had him in my basement because I had a little basement studio, and he dwarfed the room. He wasn't hanging very high, but he likes it here. He's up high now, he's flying high.
Yeah, he's got lots of room up there, man.
Yeah. And he looks down on me when I'm doing work and when I'm writing and stuff. And I'll often look at him and I'll complain bitterly. And he'll go,
now,
well,
is Eli the only one that listens when you want to complain? Is that how that works?
Yeah, more or less. Exactly. Plus, he doesn't offer a lot. He just kind of looks at me like, what is your problem? I call him Eli the Wonder Horse because when I'm wondering and I'm, my mind is wandering and my head is wondering, and I look at him and I go, Eli, what should I do? And he's like, well, you're the one that took it on, so you're the one that's going to have to decide. I go, yeah, okay. Anyhow, I had painted him years ago and repainted him, and he's got an E on his saddle blanket for Emmett, but now it's E for Eli. So there you go.
And he's like a figurehead to you in terms of now where you produce music in a loft. Instead of writing in a basement, you're now writing in this loft.
Yes, and there's windows. I can see the treetops in like 3 directions. I can see the sky. I can see the clouds rolling by. It's really lovely. It was a dream come true because all my life studio work was always done in places with no windows, and you're in a basement somewhere or you're in a industrial warehouse space somewhere. So I do love being here, and Eli sort of watches over things and gave his name to the space. There's a story about behind the whole thing about, Eli, a wonder horse. Like Elijah was one of the prophets that in a chariot, went up to heaven. He's one of the only people that in the Bible that gets to heaven without dying. Like he gets in a chariot and he rides. This is Old Testament stuff, right?
That's right.
But the bottom line, and back to your question, is everything is kind of metaphorical. When you're an artist, everything sort of presents itself as a metaphor. Every problem sort of is looking for a metaphor to try and solve it. When you write songs and you write poetry, this is what you do. When you pick up a guitar, you're sort of the process that you're in is a metaphorical one. Something is going to be representing something else. So, it's kind of fun to be in my 72nd birthday is on its way. And it's kind of fun in this chapter of my life to be having this kind of metaphorical existence and, seeing things from that perspective, it makes me feel very much like a mature artist, so uh, hopefully my wisdom is sort of at the same stage as the way that I look, old and gray.
It's really interesting because, you think about people's creativity and I remember an interview with Clint Eastwood. And they said, how do you still stay so active? How does your mind still stay sharp? And he said, I refuse to let the old man in.
Oh yeah. See, that's good. Whatever works, right? Like for
Yep.
me, the old man is something that it matters to me. Like before we went on air, I was telling you I just played 2 gigs last week, and I cannot make my hands do what my hands were able to do, 3 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, and uh, I played 2 nights in a row. The first night, I was kind of nervous. I had kind of like the nerves. I had the jitters
Right?
because my nervous system just can't handle stress the way I used to. The next night, I was calm. I was good. I was tired. And then my brain didn't work as sharp as I would have liked,
You
So the
you
old
said you
man's there, and I have to deal with him, and I don't mind that. It gives me a sense of being in the present. I don't want to deny anything. I'm going to accept it and I'm going to work with it.
but it doesn't, for you, and like I said, however you decide whether you're going to embrace it, whether you're going to look at that and defy that age defying, you have because some people have an age defying idea about things,
Yes.
or they have an idea about how old they are here.
Yep.
My dad, he was 97 years old when he passed, and he said, and I said to him, how old are you here, Dad? Oh, I'm about 18, 19 years old still.
Yeah.
You know,
The way I feel about that is that there's vast territories inside my head that will
yeah,
always be like anywhere from about 9 to about 22, 23.
yeah,
That was a huge chunk of the life that made me turn into the thing that I became,
yeah.
and that'll never go away.
No,
And when I started having some stress and anxiety issues, and I was seeing a therapist, she would recommend to me, you got to embrace the child that you have. The child is never going to leave you, and you have to, love that child and take care of that child and nurture that child that you have inside. So I get that. And then the other side of it, the people that are defying their old age, I think it's maybe because they're capable of it, and good for them.
well,
If you can defy it, that's an awesome thing. But there's certain things that I'm not going to defy, because then I think it's delusion. And I go,
well,
no, I don't want to do that. I want to accept things for the way they are.
yeah, and I think there's some stuff that you talk about in the book. That you talk about inevitabilities of certain things, and there's an inevitability to everything.
Yes.
I mean, what kind of blew my mind is, I'm going to have to I may put my specs on just to read this, because this is brilliant. Who helped you, or did you do this all on your own? The contents.
No, that's me. Yeah, no. I mean, I had an editor that would look over things, but in actual fact, at ECW Press, my editor, Michael Holmes, he's a very uh, liberal-minded kind of an editor, and I love that. And then they assigned an editor that started to go through it. And when I
Right.
got first proofs back, I phoned Michael. I said, this is bullshit. You can't do this to me. Like,
Yeah.
that's not my voice. I have to have my own voice.
Right.
And he went, "Oh no, I'm so sorry. Yes, I want to make sure it's your voice." So that's all me. Now, when you talk about like the illustrations in there, Janine Leach from Pittsburgh, double play designs. Janina has worked with me for years, done album covers and CD covers, and so I would send her sketches that were, cartoons, like junk.
Right.
And then
Right.
she would turn it into something that really looked wonderful and worked great.
Uh,
And she had as much sort of, I think she had more creative, like the cover on it. I had no idea. She came up with that steampunk kind of thing. I did send her a logo that had the 10 guitars in a circle, but
Right.
then, yeah, like, well, we were just at this gig, so I have event shirts, so I'm going to hold this up so you can see the.
Hold it nice and still.
Yeah, there you go. Look at that.
There
Eh?
we go. Oh,
Oh, I'm checking the
Telecaster
wrong way. There
Tales.
we go.
Very
So I
nice.
had done that central logo, but all the things of like the different types of triangles, that was all her. It was great. So yeah, that's the cover of the book. There's my name. There I am. Okay, enough of
Well,
that.
let's while we're at it, because we're talking away here. I'm just gonna very, very quick. I'm gonna put it up there so people can see it. There is the cover of the book. Liner notes for guitar and its music. Very interesting book. It's a great read. You got to get it. If you haven't seen it, you need to find it anywhere books are sold and get yourself a copy of it. Claire sent me, your proofs, one of your first runs there, and I read it cover to cover, and it blew my mind.
Well, thanks. I mean, it does. Yes, it's liner notes for 10 things that I recorded. And I think at some point it behooves anyone to, go onto their streaming platform and give it a listen, or, download them from Bandcamp so that they can listen to the songs and then read the stuff and then go back and forth a little bit, because there'll be things that you read that you'll go, wait a sec, I want to listen and double check what he's talking about here.
65 and lazy eyes. I'm going to say this. The real magic of layers. I love the way that these contents are laid out. The stories within the stories within the story. You got to move it. I mean, as I read those, I read the contents before I even got into the book, and I'm like, every one of these makes you want to explore that chapter.
Yeah, well, I'm glad for that. I mean, what's a title of a chapter or a title of a song supposed to be, but a hook that kind of draws you in, and then the first sentence or two that you write, that's also got to be something that sets it up and makes people go, "Oh, I'm interested. I want to find out more." So, that's like writing 101. But of course, the other thing is it gives you themes. And so when I started writing in my notebooks, I would be going, oh, this is a theme for sure. I want to talk about layers. Oh, I want to talk about triangulation, how three things corrals an idea and, allows you to realize a concept once you've triangulated something. So, every one of them, I thought that'll be, I can associate that to this song, so that can be in this song's chapter. But I mean, I designed a guitar. So you're going to start out by saying, yeah, the history of Telecaster guitars. Let's start at the beginning. I wasn't born until 1953, but Leo Fender and his guys came up with the Telecaster 1949, 1950. By the time, it wasn't called Telecaster right away, but it was 51 when they started to finally, be marketing.
And something I didn't know that you pointed out, it became the Nocaster when Gretsch made a noise about the design.
Yeah. Well, they had the name, and I think they were using it at the time on a set of drums that was like the broadcaster drums. But don't forget, like, and you're around my age, so well, you might be a little younger than me, but yeah, around that time, everybody was sort of getting into this thing about television, and the technology was just starting to. There were Sputniks in space, and all this stuff was happening. So names like broadcaster, Telecaster, it was like, oh yeah, this is this is cool lingo, So that's where it all started.
I know, and the getting into the whole thing of fingerstyle, right? And talking about fingerstyle guitar. I remember meeting a guitar player one time, and he said to me, if you can learn to play with both hands, you're unstoppable.
Yeah, well, that's a good quote.
And then he showed me how to do it. Like he played, chicken picking stuff on a telly, and I'm like, how do you do that?
Yeah. Well, I'm sort of lucky, and I talked about this in my memoir, and I talk about it in this book too, that My left hand, this is the one that I do gross motor control things with. So it's on the fretboard for the guitar, and that gives me an advantage over right-handed guys. My right hand, I do fine motor control. Like I write with a pen, I eat with my fork with my right hand.
Yep.
So I'm the guitar playing it in a right-handed way. It's kind of right in my wheelhouse, for the way that my brain is wired and the way that, my physiology works. I think right-handed guys struggle a little bit with their trying to coordinate their left hand with their right, and their right becomes a little dominant. They want to strum. Like when I started, I wanted to be like McCartney, and I wanted to be strumming with my left hand.
Right.
And but I had a guitar teacher. I said, no, turned it around on my lap and said, "You're going to learn this way. I'm left-handed, and I play this way, and I'm telling you,
right.
it gives you an advantage." So
That's right.
that was a really lucky thing for me. One of my chapters should have been just called serendipity, because a lot of times that's what it is. You just kind of luck into something and you go, "Hey, this is working. I'm not going to question serendipity. Thank you very much."
It's really funny you mentioned that, because when I first took up guitar, playing right-handed always felt awkward to me. I felt I should have been playing left.
Oh yeah, well there you go.
Right. But I ended up sticking with the right, and I'm glad I did.
Yeah.
Because
I think it confers like a lucky advantage. And there's a lot, like the list of guitar players that are lefties that play righty. Richie Blackmore. He just had his 80th birthday.
That's right.
Yesterday.
That's right.
So, and Richie was one of my first guitar heroes.
Was.
Rock guitar heroes. I had other guitar heroes, and I mentioned them in the book. But Paul Simon is a left-handed guy that plays guitar right-handed. Waddy Wachtel, people might go, "I don't know that name." You go, well, Waddy was, he was part of the backup band for Linda Ronstadt. He's the guy that played the famous one-note solo on "Oh Sherry" by Steve Perry. You know that?
Oh, wow. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. So, and Waddy, he toured with Keith Richards. He was in the Drunken Winos, and he's played with a lot of folks.
And you've got to play with some really famous guitar players. You've had the pleasure of doing that. You played with George Benson, right?
Yeah, I did. Yeah. You want to hear that story?
Yeah, tell us a little bit about that story.
Well, so it was the Buffalo Niagara Guitar Festival. I think it was 2001, somewhere around there. And I knew that the guy that ran the festival, he was the president of WNED-TV, the PBS station in Buffalo. And Don, I think it's Boswell or something like Don Boswell. Anyways, I'd read in an interview that he said, my dream is to get Jeff Beck and Carlos Santana and Jimmy Page on a stage together. So I knew that he dreamed about having these, collaborations occur. Right. So I told my road manager, send a note up, make sure that Don lets George Benson and his road manager know that the music that I listened to on my honeymoon was the Breezin' album. It was, my wife and I, was one of our favorite records, and he's a hero of mine. And he was playing up the street at Shay's, and it was early in the evening, like an 8 p.m. start. And I was down the street at this place called the Tralfalmador nightclub. It's no longer there in Buffalo, but it was a famous place that had been around for years. And my set didn't start till like 11 at night. So I knew that if he came up the street, he could be there for the encore. Anyways, long story short, he showed up. And apparently his road manager, the check that paid for the gig had this note stapled to it from Don saying, George, we're paying you an awful lot of money. It would be really nice if you went up the street and jammed with Rik Emmett at his bar. So my road manager came through a note on the stage. It said, George is here. And I went, okay. So when I came up for the encore, I made an introduction. And as he was walking through the club, coming to the stage, my keyboard player started playing dunk, 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 boom, 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 boom,
nice.
But the band's playing Broadway, so that's what we jammed on, and it was great. He just ripped it up. I mean, you can imagine George Benson is already really good. Probably when he wakes up and just rolls out of bed.
Ah,
But he'd already played a full gig. He was so warmed up. He was so
yeah.
ready to just rip that when he got up there, it was just like, oh my God.
You know,
Okay.
it's really funny. I mean, I've read both your books now, and you know these last two books, I like them together. Lay it on the line because there's some references that go back and forth between both books. You know, I'm going to issue you a little bit of a challenge tonight because you talk in the end of your book about chapters, stuff that happens in your life, and you're now entering another chapter of your life,
Yes.
right? And you talked about the vulnerability of being live. And tonight, you and I experienced that vulnerability before the show because of some difficulty getting you in and getting connected.
Yes.
Technology challenge.
Yeah.
But the cool thing about that, you said in this one interview, you said the vulnerability of being live, you just don't know how it's going to go. And you just did 2 live shows.
Yes. Yeah. And, I was a little freaked out. I'll admit it. I haven't played a live gig in 7 years. Plus, talk about sort of giving yourself a mountain of a challenge to climb. I did all 10 Telecaster Tales as the first set. So 10 songs that I'd never really played live before, all by myself, solo, the first night I was scared. I had jitters. I think I handled it okay, but it wasn't perfect. And I think that's what I just saw an interesting thing, in my Instagram feed. It was a guy that he counsels classical musicians and talks to them about the psychology of what they do. And he said, most people have things backwards between practicing and performance. When they're practicing, they give themselves all kinds of leeway and they go, oh, it wasn't perfect, but doesn't matter. Oh, it'll be cool when I get to the gig. Oh, I know what I'm doing. Oh, I'm going to stop here and I'm going to repeat this section 14 times to get to know it really good. And then I'm going to skip the next part because I know it. In other words, they rehearse, they practice in a way where it's not perfect. They're not even looking for perfection. They're just doing this messy, weird kind of self-indulgent thing. Then they go to perform and they go, okay, I've got to be perfect. I've got to be amazing. No mistakes. And he goes, but you didn't practice that way. So how can you expect that you're going to be able to do that? You're putting way too much pressure on yourself. You've got to completely ass backwards. What you got to do is practice in a way that you're going, okay, this is going to be perfect. I'm going to do this and I'm going to get it exactly right, and drive yourself to that when you're practicing so that when you get to the performance, you can go, I'm loose as a goose. I'm free as a bird. I am just going to get up there. I'm going to perform. I'm just going to enjoy the moment. I'm just going to have a moment. And so that's the way we get it backwards. And I thought so much truth in that. Now, of course, when I was younger, I coached a lot of sports, youth baseball in particular. And I
Right?
used to tell my baseball players, well, they weren't mine. I was just a bench coach, but still, I would tell them, when you practice, this is where you must really try to be like practice as perfectly as you can. This
Yep.
must be where you really, really chase it. This is where you're establishing the habits of whatever kind of an athlete you are going to be. And I would say go further than that. I would say this is where you're going to establish the habits of what kind of a human being you're going to be, what kind of discipline you're going to have,
Right.
what kind of character you're going to have. When you get to the game, that's when you get to show your integrity and your character, and you can just enjoy it. You can have a great moment. So, that was an interesting thing. If I'd seen that before I wrote the book, I would have made sure I had some of that in the book.
Well, I mean, hindsight's always a beautiful thing too, right?
Yes.
Because, you think I could have done, shoulda, woulda, coulda, didn't. But the thing is that you go into that performance, there's a vulnerability in doing a live performance. And also there's that human factor. As humans, we're imperfect to start with.
Yes. And the lovely thing, of course, I haven't played, as I said, haven't played a gig in 7 years. So book comes out and I go, okay, the work itself, the 10 songs, the book, all of that, it's not going to be 100% real in my mind and in my heart unless I've kind of done the gauntlet of the live thing. So you go and you do the live thing. I haven't played in 7 years. The people that bought the tickets and came out, they love me. They adore me. And, I don't say that in an egotistical way. I say that because I come out on stage and I'm nervous as shit. And then here, these people, they provide this beautiful safety net for me of, like I could have come out there and burped and they would have gone, oh, that's great. But
because
what a great
they're not.
burp, Rick.
But the audience you have, they're not there to judge you,
Yes.
right?
That's right. And
They're
that's what my
there.
wife says to me too. She says, Rick, you're tying yourself up in knots, and those people are going to be so supportive. They're going to be they're going to love whatever you give them, and they're going to love your mistakes, And in truth, you talk about vulnerability and stuff. When I got up there and I admitted on the mic, hey, I'm nervous and I'm not used to this. And wow, and they would, people would say, we love you, Rick. And they would applaud. And it was like, don't worry, man. We got you. And that's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing to be on stage knowing that the audience is going to cut you all kinds of slack.
Well, you're at the point in your career though where you don't have to prove yourself anymore. You've got a loyal following of people who like what you're doing. They like to see what's going to come out of the Emmett camp next.
Yeah.
I'm
You
going
want
to
me to
take
flip that on its head for you?
I'm going to take it way back here.
Well, wait, let me flip that on its head for you, just,
Okay.
To say, because when I was a younger man, when I wore a younger man's clothes, was I supposed to believe it when critics wrote, say, in a newspaper, oh, this is awful, this is lousy, this guy's no good? Am I supposed to listen, when somebody tells me how bad I am or how horrible I am? No, I had to believe in myself. Now, when somebody's telling me, oh, Rick, you're great, you can do no wrong, am I supposed to believe that? No, I'm not supposed to believe that either, because what I have to believe is whatever I'm deciding, and if I decide that's not up to snuff, I can do better, then I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that's the thing that drove me to become the musician that I am, the writer that I am, the artist that I am. And I have to keep listening to that guy. So when I go out and I play and I'm not happy with what I did, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. It's lovely to have everybody love it and like me and grant me the thing. But in the end, I go to bed with me. I lie down with me. This is the noise that I have to put up with. So, that's the thing.
I mean, so student, I forgot to add that to your resume. Student, lifelong student, still learning.
Yes. And
always be learning.
Yeah. Don't you think that's a good thing, to be humble, to be modest about things? Because once you start to believe your own press clippings or your own promo, like, those are the kind of artists that when I meet them, at an awards show or backstage somewhere or whatever, I go, yeah, this is not my kind of person, really. I like people that remain humble and modest and I used to tell my students in college, look, you think you're a great writer, you think you should be in the way of the work because your ego is so vast. And I go, right. When you're staring into the face of infinity, which is what creative work is, and you could be spiritual, you could call it God, you could call it the universe, I don't care, no judgment, but I do think that there's an infinite challenge involved in art. And so you should be humble and modest in the face of the infinite. Like, who do you think you are? You have to get to a point where you can hear the work talking to you, telling you what it wants to become. That's a critical thing in the development of a writer. You're sitting there, I'm looking up at Eli going, what's next? And Eli goes, well, what is the song telling you? What's the music telling you that it needs?
Right.
And that's the answer to every problem.
And you're interviewing yourself in that sense of saying, this is, what am I going to do? What's the next step to this whole thing?
Yes.
Collaborating with oneself is a real challenging thing because you're using your own mind to collaborate with.
Yep.
Whereas, when you do other works and you're working with other writers, there might be four of you working on that project, and everybody brings a different idea to the table, and everybody has a different approach to it. And yet, none is better than the other. They all end up becoming a great collective thing.
Sometimes, and
Sometimes.
sometimes, the train comes right off the rails and, like, uh, I once did a television show with Bruce Cockburn, and we had a couple of rehearsals, and, I really admire and respect Bruce, and in one of the conversations, he said to me, "Well, he grew up sort of Ottawa area, Ottawa Valley
Right.
somewhere, and he played in a band when he was in high school," and he said to me, "Rick, I was about 19 and I realized, man, I don't want to be in a band. I don't want other guys telling me what my songs should do. I don't, I want to be my own boss." And he became sort of a solo artist, figuring it out for himself. And many of the artists that I admire and respect are very strong willed. They don't really collaborate all that much, like, which is not to say, like, for example, Donald Fagen, he had Walter Becker there beside him,
Yep.
and they were bouncing things back and forth, a dynamic duo to be sure. And then they would hire the greatest players and, have them as collaborators. But they were definitely telling those guys, "Oh, try this or try this, or that's not quite right. Or this is kind of what I'm looking for." They were very much control freaks.
Yep.
And one of my best friends is Ian Thomas. And I know that Ian is a complete control freak, especially when he's in the studio working on his stuff. Like,
Right.
nobody's going to tell Ian how things go. Ian tells Ian how
How
things
how
go.
does how do things feel now compared to the days of Triumph when you were always struggling to come up with material to try and figure out what you're going to put on the next album? I've seen you talk about that pressure of having to write, and of course you guys were out touring while you're trying to write and you're trying to put an album out. Whole different deal since you've gone solo because you had more freedom to breathe, right?
Yeah, well, I would say the first, 10 years after leaving Triumph, there was still a pressure to net fresh product that you're trying to get on the radio, or you're trying to sell a lot of product. And then I got to about, 1996, 97, and then I just didn't give a shit anymore. It was kind of like, I'm going to go on my own schedule, whatever I turn out, whoever buys it, I'm not trying to get on the radio formats. I'm just going to, be creative and on my own schedule. And in some respects, it's kind of like you open up the floodgates. And so, here I am, 71 years of age, and I write poetry and I write songs and I write guitar
Right.
pieces, and I don't discriminate about my creative process. We did a thing in our family where at Christmas everybody got these little plaques, like little like for painting, acrylic paint and a
Yep.
little board. And so everybody was painting, and we had to paint with certain colors because it was going to be part of a Canadian mosaic-y thing. I don't know. So everybody in the family had to do it, and then we were all taking pictures of our thing and sending it to each other in the family. And on mine, I started and I painted this thing. It was a horizon with a tree in front, and then I went, I want the tree to be 3D. I want the bark to become. So then I was like mixing like like dry decks, polyfilla, and putting it and then scraping it so that it would look like bark. And then I went, geez, I think I want the branches to be coming off the. So I was getting wire and I was bending the wire, and then I was putting the dry decks on the wire. So then I had this tree coming off of the painting. It was 3D completely, and it sits on a shelf now in our living room. Like, it's not ever going to be in a museum. It's nothing except this thing that was like a creative act that I had so much fun doing it. And that's the way it is for me now. Like, I'm just going to go, well, whatever happens, happens. And I'm not going to worry about whether or not it fits in this pigeonhole or this shoebox or this format or this
Right.
section of the I was going to say section of the record store, and these don't even exist anymore. So.
I said I was going to challenge you tonight, and one of the things that I'd like you to think about as you go forward. So this show is all about awareness. It's about creating awareness about music and about creativity, and that's what our record label is founded on. It's founded on that whole idea of art ahead of commerce. And nobody on my record label cares whether they're making money off their music. They're just caring that they can share their music with the world.
Right.
And the interesting thing about it is that we've had artists that never had much coverage before who are now being heard in 85 countries.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, I mean, that we were you touched on something really briefly before, and so now I can reincorporate it a little bit, which is the idea of the digital universe. You know, that technology, for all of the things about it that I really truly hate and cannot get along with and struggle with mightily, the digital universe has made it so that the entry bar is very low. You know, you can get distribution for things, you can get streaming for things, you know, it's a global marketplace now, you know, and you can make records on your laptop and you don't need to know much to be able to do multi-tracking,
right,
high quality, like the demos that I can do with my iPhone, where I just set it there and turn it, and on a voice memo, I just sit and play, and I go, man, where was this when I was 15 years old and I could have really used it, you know? And
better quality than a Zoom. Better quality than a Zoom.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. Yeah. So, and in fact, there's lots of folks that they use their phones, they record a part, that part will end up as on their masters. You know, they go, I'm never going to really recapture the really cool quality of it's like, it's not lo-fi, but it has a lo-fi vibe that this was the first original kind of whatever it is, melodic idea or chord change or whatever. And then you go, no, I'm going to keep that. I'm going to use that and incorporate that. And I'm never going to lose it. It's going to be at the heart of whatever I build. And I love that. You know, I think there's certain things about technology. Now, the other thing, of course, is, and I say this in the book, thank God for digital technology, because when I wrote these pieces, they were hard pieces to play. It was, it's at a high level. And so you haven't had 2 years to be playing the stuff and getting it under your hands. I go on, you know, I know I've got a chart. I know how I want it to go. I don't have to know it A to Z with no mistakes, because I've got digital technology. I can play and I can edit this and I can make it be, you know, all one thing. Now, having said that, the leap from having the record and the record's out and people can sit and listen to it and they can listen, they can stream it. Like now I've got to be able to learn how to play it to live to get from A to Z.
There it is right there. 10 Telecaster Tales. That is the artwork for the book. And there's the artwork for the music.
Yeah. I'm going to show you something else too. I don't know. These all sold out. Put me back on the main screen.
I'm going to put you back on the main screen there. Yeah.
Can you see this?
Oh, what is that?
We did hardcover versions of the book. This is like the Bible. It's hardcover. And the CD came in the back.
Coffee table.
Like is stuck in the back. So, and those cost a fortune, but they were all there. There was like an autograph plate in the front, so that I autographed every single one of them. And I think we only did like 150 or something like that, 200 of them. And they sold out almost right away.
And it
covered they got their money back. But yeah, sorry, what did you say?
They flew off the shelf.
Yeah, well, we did those as a pre-order, pre-release thing, and now the paperback is out, and you know these things were crazy. They were like $150 or something, but
some of this stuff
was very reasonable.
I'm going to get rid of that and put you and I back on the screen here. Hang on a second. There we go.
There we are.
Some of that fingerstyle stuff started with this album.
Yes.
Right? There's a reference to that in the book.
Yeah.
Right?
There's a piece that I play called Nocturne at the end. It's the 10th piece. And it felt very fitting as a final piece. because it's kind of sad, but it's in E minor. Spinal Tap said that D minor was the saddest of all keys, but I beg to differ. I think for guitar players, E minor is great and very sad because it has a lot of open strings and a lot of great harmonics. And Nocturne sort of was coming full circle back to Moonchild from,
Right.
yeah. And even conceptually, the idea of moonlight on snow was kind of what was operating behind the scenes metaphorically for me as I was putting together those chord progressions. Can you? I'm going to just grab something here.
I want to. You got Babs beside you there? We should.
I
show
do,
everybody
but I was going to
Babs.
grab this one because you might be able to hear it better. Can you hear this all right?
I can hear that. Yeah.
Okay, so this progression.
Oh yeah. Haunting.
Like that was making me feel about snow gently falling down and landing on cedars, and when the moonlight's on it and it kind of gets crystals, and that was sort of the progression. So yeah, you want to see Babs?
Yeah, let's take a look at Babs. We'll put you back up on full screen here.
Okay, there she is. So it's a telly, telly body and a telly neck with a telly headstock, but this it's got a Gibson style bridge, so the string height is like a Les Paul or a 335.
Is it Les Paul? Is it Les Paul scale too?
Yeah, the scale length of this neck is 24 3/4, so it's a little easier to play, a little soupier. It's nice for the jazz stuff, like that kind of stuff. Like
they always said that the shorter scale afforded a different, rounder sound.
Yes.
Than your full length Strat or or a full 24 fret guitar.
Yeah, well, the scale length of the Fenders was 25.5.
Yeah.
So when it's a little bit longer, it ends up being a little tighter, a little brighter, and of course the whole Fender aesthetic, pickups wise, bridge wise, it was all about bright cutting. They started with the sound of a pedal steel guitar and went, that's what we're after, right? Gibson, the historical thing there was, and I've got one of those. I can grab it here. Here's one that I can show you. The thing about a Les Paul and Gibson guitars is they're like old arch tops, and they wrap around you. So
that's right.
You see the way the bridge is really high.
Yep.
But the neck is set in at an angle so that it's like the guitar is going to wrap around you, and then by the time you get to the headstock, you see it angles back at I think it's a 17-degree pitch or something. I don't. But so when you're playing it, it's kind of wrapping around you, and it's like a cello or a violin in the way that it's kind of put together. So
very much so.
Old school. Fender's idea was, we're going to make them flat so that they can sit on the workbench like this, flat, and you can put all the parts in, and it can be like an assembly line. Everybody was now thinking about industrial commercial considerations.
Yeah, I mean, the first half of your book, I like how you set up the first half of the book to lead up towards the the 10 Telecaster Tales. And then as you start getting into the second half of the book and you start to discuss, the writing behind the tales themselves and what the tales represent. I like how it goes part 2 and into the 10 Telecaster Tales and some things about each of the tracks. So it starts off with So Pushy, and I was listening to So Pushy and I put it on repeat and listened to it over and over again while I read that chapter.
Right.
It's mind-blowing. I had my earbuds in, I'm reading the book, and I'm being saturated by the book and the music, and it just felt so cool to be in that moment, because it really does allow you to sort of be in the moment.
Yeah, I think one of the goals of writing such a comprehensive, liner note thingy about every piece is that I am trying to give people an insight into creative process. and how many layers of things. You're just listening to a song, and in 3.5 minutes, it's going to be over. And that 3.5 minutes, maybe you weren't even paying attention for 2.5 minutes of it. Your attention would wander. But if you're reading the book and you're listening, that comprehensive approach that you took to absorbing it, that's fantastic. I couldn't ask for anything better. That's as deep as you can get. And but I mean, there's stuff. When the piece goes by, like So Pushy has things in it like this lick shows up over and over again. This, I do it in different octaves.
Right. Now, where does that lick come from?
Lenny Bro.
Okay.
Like I ended up doing it way high. Like I learned that at a workshop in Parkdale Collegiate when I was maybe 17 years old,
Right.
And I learned it from a guy named Alf Cormier, and he said, "No, I can show you this." So it's like you're playing the tonic and the fourth, but you roll the fourth up to a flat 5, and then you have this minor third coming up. And I've used it in over and over again in pieces, but like So Pushy is full of that stuff. It's the stuff that I learned when I was learning how to play guitar,
And it's cool because as you're describing, the making of the track and the writing of the track, and then I was looking at the liner notes. I'm listening to the recording over and over, playing over and over while I at a really nice listening volume while I'm reading this chapter, and it's like the whole chapter is becoming more alive because I'm listening to the music that inspired it, and I can't decide which it inspired which. Did the book inspire the music, or did the music inspire the book?
Well, I think it's fair to say that the creative spirit of a human being came up with all of that messy stuff. And then if another human being is being given the opportunity to get into that, creative mess, like that's all you can ever hope for.
Well, it's a great read. 10 Telecaster Tales. It's an awesome read. It's not dog-eared yet, but it's bookmarked in a few spots because there's some really cool stuff. I mean, and like I say, I feel like we're scratching the tip of the iceberg with this book, because it also opened me to go back and to lay it on the line and pull out some references and lay it on the line. There's a reference in there. You talk about Roy Clark playing a song. Do you remember?
Malaguena.
Malaguena, right?
Yeah.
So it took me down a rabbit hole. So I go and I Google Roy Clark playing that song, and I find all the different references, and I play different cuts of him playing that song.
Yeah.
Right? I'm like, holy crow. Like, I knew he was a great guitar player, but I didn't realize how good he really was.
Oh, yeah. He was actually a very good banjo player, a very good violinist. Like music just kind of rolled out of him. I mean, we all think of him from my generation. We think of that guy on Hee Haw.
Yep.
But, he was an extremely accomplished guitar player that had the respect of everybody in Nashville, which
Glenn
wasn't
Campbell.
as big as it is now, but it was, it was a tight circle.
Glenn Campbell, another great guitar player.
Oh, incredible. Yeah. I did a thing where I like people that do podcasts. Sometimes now they do things where they do them live in front of an audience. And so a friend of mine, and Brent Jensen, has one. And I did in Collingwood, Ontario, I did a night where I went up and I had a guitar with me. And so he'd ask me some questions. I would illustrate some things. And we played a game of I Wish I Wrote. And one of the songs that I played was Wichita Lineman. Now, it's not just Glenn Campbell. The genius of that song was also Jimmy Webb, the writer.
Right.
And it's just an incredibly beautiful song.
My studio here would accommodate a crowd of about 25 people.
Yeah, well, you keep growing your podcast, you get to the point where you can have a little live thing going.
Well, as I say, I mean, maybe Rik Emmett would come down to the studio and do a live show from the studio.
Yeah, maybe. We'll see. Can I tell you what's in my immediate future?
Sure.
Like, I
Let's
did
hear
those
it.
2 shows so that my wife and I are gonna climb on a plane next week. We're going to Paris for 5 days.
Oh, nice.
Then we're gonna take the train up to Amsterdam. We're gonna spend 2 days in Amsterdam. Then we're gonna get on a cruise boat, and we're gonna go all the way down to Switzerland and take our time, and when I get back from that holiday after being in Europe for a month, I'm gonna go, "Okay, um, what do I want to do with this next chapter of my life?" And I don't know. I don't know if I want to play live anymore or not. That was
You
one of the reasons why I did what I did, so that I could see how do I feel. Now, I have a poetry book that's coming out in October, and I wrote it during COVID, but of course we're now facing this world of tariff wars and I during COVID I was so unhappy with Trump that I thought, well, this is dark. I'm not sure this poetry would be something for the general public consumption. But when Trump got elected again, I talked to my editor Michael Holmes at ECW Press, and I said, I think that poetry book is going to be very current, and I think it's going to be a lot of stuff that will speak directly to people's unease and unhappiness, and anyhow. So yeah, that's in my immediate future. I'm not going to make any hard decisions for months.
Right, right. Well, like I said, maybe on that list you'd consider regular contributor on this show, and I don't mean regular as in every week, but maybe regular in once every 3 months or something like that.
Well, we'll think about it. I mean, certainly when the poetry book's coming out, I'll be happy to talk to you again
Well,
when I'm doing the next round of marketing.
like I said, I feel we barely scratched the surface tonight, and again, I may get some calls from people saying, "Hey, could you interview Rik again and talk about the books?" Because I feel like we're just barely scratching the surface here in what's contained in that book. And you took me down a whole bunch of rabbit holes. Wishbone Ash.
Yes.
Oh my God. What a
Yeah.
talented group of fellas, hey?
Yeah, and I think there was a blues song on the one that had the wishbone burned on the cover. So I think it was just called Wishbone After. It was like,
Oh yeah.
I've
Nice.
learned it note for note, phrase for phrase. And I don't
Nice.
know if it was Powell or Turner, but it was one of those two guys. And man, I just loved that band. I thought they were really cool. Now,
There's something that I listened to a cool project called Liberty Manifesto.
yes.
Oh my God, Rik, Edge of Your Mind blew my mind.
Well, good. I'm glad. I'll let Mike Shotton know that there's fans out there. That was a vanity project, to be sure. But
That is an album that needs a reissue and some more air under it, because it's so well done. It's well recorded. It's well performed. There's so many technical aspects in that one track alone. I'm listening to it and I'm listening to how technical the song is, and I'm going, there's yes, there's Triumph, there's Rush, there's anybody that's ever been a technical art rock. If you're an art rock dude, you owe it to yourself to go and grab Liberty Manifesto. You won't be disappointed. I mean, there's a great work right there.
thank you.
Um,
Yeah,
is,
I,
is
w-
there
I
any,
was very proud of it. And it came. I think it was around 2007 that we did that.
is there still some rock in there? Are we going to hear another rock album?
I don't know. Honestly, I don't know. Yeah, the Coalition for Music Education in Canada has chosen the song "Hold On" from 1979 as their theme song for this thing that they do nationally called Music Mondays. And that's May 5th. They're going to have this thing all across the country. Hold on, choirs and schools. Everybody's going to be doing Hold On.
Look
And
at that
so
poster.
Gil phones me tonight and he says, Rik, the Southside Shuffle here in Mississauga, they're good. They want can Triumph show up because they're going to make us icons on the Walk of Fame or blah, blah, blah. And they want us to do Hold On. I said, Bill, I can't sing. I can't hit those notes anymore, but we might make an appearance. I don't know. But anyways, this Hold On thing is going on there. We've made a video for it. I sent a text to this guy that I'd met. I'd interviewed him when I was at Humber, the producer Greg Wells, who has done things with like Katy Perry and Adele, and he's done now the scores for Disney movies and stuff. I think he did Wicked. He was like the music producer for Wicked. Anyways, Greg had years ago, he toured with Kim Mitchell, but he had been a Humber student, and he can play everything: keys, drums, guitar, bass, unbelievable. And so I said, Greg, will you play some keyboards on this version of Hold On that we're working up? Like, we can send you the things, and you can send your parts back. And I said, I knew that he bought a church out in Winterton, Newfoundland, where his dad had been a minister and he'd grown up as a kid. So he said he had this thing where he woke up from a nap one day and it was like, you got to go buy a church. So he went online looking. Here's the church where his dad had been a minister. So he tried to buy it. It wasn't for sale. It had already sold, but the one that was like across the street was also for sale. So he bought it. And then he went down there and they were renovating it and putting a studio in. And then he found the bell that used to be up in the bell tower and he renovated that and he put the bell up there. And I said, Greg, I got to get the bell on Hold On. We got to get the bell on Hold On. And he said, I'll do it. Yeah, we'll get the bell in there. So
awesome.
We got the bell on there and it's going to be this coast to coast to coast thing. And that kind of thing resurrects the past in a way that makes me sometimes go, well, your question was, will I ever rock again? I don't know if I'll ever rock in a full blown, going to make an album, going to go out on a tour, going to do, but there might be a song from time to time. There might be a revisiting of the past from time to time where some of the rock comes back. I don't know. I mean, it's kind of fun to hear yourself singing a song that you sang 50 years ago, and then here's another young woman singing on it, and she's killing it. And then some kid who's a student at Gill's Metalworks Institute, and he plays like that, those power chords. Yep. And I go, okay, that's pretty awesome. Like, that's pretty good. And there's no age to that. Now music is it's moved outside the whole thing. So I'm never going to say never. I don't know, but I don't feel like I ever want to necessarily. I liked 10 Telecaster Tales was I could do it all by myself in my studio here. I didn't need any other musicians. I didn't need to turn the amp up loud. And I went, this suits me. I like this, so I don't know.
And sometimes is that a place in your mind? I mean, you're at that a place in your mind, you go, it's not on the calendar today, but you just never know what's going to happen. We don't know. I mean, that's the great thing about life is we don't know what tomorrow will hold.
That's
sometimes we don't even know if tomorrow will come.
That's it. That's totally it. I think in the poetry book that I have coming out, I do a thing where I quote the character. You remember Tom Hanks was in a movie called Castaway.
Yep.
And I can't remember the name of the character, and I can't remember the name of the screenwriter. I'm sorry, but
I remember the name of the ball. Wilson.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. But there was a scene in there where he's gone and he's sort of met with his wife who thought he was dead. And it's an incredibly heavy moving scene. And then he drives over and he's having a drink of scotch at his pal's place. And there's ice in the glass. And he's just going, ice, holy shit, what an incredible thing. And so they're talking about, and he goes, like in the end, this is kind of like the summation of the whole movie. What like he was cast away on this island for, I don't know, 7 years or 12 years or whatever it was. And then, so he comes back to civilization and he says, how did you keep yourself alive? How did you keep going? He goes, well, he said, you just have to, every day, you don't know what the tide is going to bring in. He goes, and he said that there was this piece of, like, I don't know, the side of an outhouse or something was like this giant, and he used it as a sail in order to be able to get his raft out over the reef and get out into open water. And he said, you don't know what the tide is going to bring in. And he goes, every day you really just have to put one foot in front of the other. That's all you have to do. And you just wait to see what will come if you just keep taking the next step. And I honestly think that's kind of the secret to life, like
Yep.
just no matter what situation you're in, just try to make the step forward. Don't step back. Don't step sideways.
I'm going to share something with you. A couple of things I want to share with you tonight. So here's an old in concert poster of Triumph.
Posters. Helix was the opening act. I
with
see you
Helix
wearing a
is the
Helix
opening
shirt too, eh?
Yeah. So I mean, here's the cool thing. Helix is on my record label. We do all their we manage all their digital distribution for them, and they have a new single coming out the end of this month, or actually on this Friday. It's called "Stand Up." It's a killer tune.
Great.
Brian Vollmer wrote it with a couple of guys down in Florida, and then Gord Pryor. Do you know Gordy Pryor?
The name certainly rings a bell. I may have met him.
So Gord wrote a lot of songs with Brian over the years, and he took the song and wrote all the lyrics for it. And Brian went in the studio, loved the lyrics, loved the vibe of the song, and they recorded it, and it's part of their 50th anniversary. So
great. Oh, that's good.
It's kind of interesting how, how people either stick with what they do or they do something different. And you have certainly had a vast array of experiences, and listening to 10 Telecaster Tales. I mean, get the book, get the tracks, and listen to the tracks while you're reading the book, because it's mind blowing. And there are parts of the rocker in there. You can hear it in the licks. It's all there.
Yes.
Right.
I mean, that's part of my DNA musically. And I think part of it too was, there was, when I was starting to write the material, there were some things where it was jazzy and some things that were kind of classical in nature. And I went, yeah, but don't deny yourself. Make sure that there's a lot of who you are as a player in there. So, yeah, it might be a classical lick, but then, there might be a little bluesy thing that kind of, comes out of it. Or because I started out as a blues guy that turned into a rocker. That was, that was my roots. And so it shows up in all of the pieces in one way or another.
And you draw your inspiration not from just your surroundings. I mean, Eli is one of your sounding boards. How about your lovely wife?
Yes, of course. After this gig, we had photographers there, and videographers and stuff, and so they send these pictures in folders, the Google folder, and there's like 40 pictures, and I go, okay, geez, which ones are good? And the first thing I do is I go through and I pick maybe a dozen, and then I'll send them to my wife, and I'll say, hey, honey, which ones? And she'll go, oh, definitely this one, definitely not this one. I go, okay, like, I trust her judgment. I trust her taste, and yeah, she keeps me grounded. That's for sure.
Yeah, and you guys have known each other for many, many years.
Yeah, well, I think this anniversary will be 49.
Wow.
And we lived together for a year before that, and we dated for about 6 months before we moved in together. So yeah, and I knew her in high school. I didn't date her then, but I knew who she was because when she was in grade 9, her pals had come running up to me. I was in grade 11 at the time.
Right.
And they went, see that girl over there? She really likes you. And I went, grade 9, I'm not interested, So yeah, I was chasing cheerleaders at the time.
Amazing what a few years does. And then all of a sudden, boom.
Yeah. Well, and I was in Act 3, so the band before I was in Triumph when I met Jeanette, and
right.
Actually, I was still playing with Justin Page, which was the band before Act 3, and she came out on a Halloween night.
The one where you had your hand on the hand on your cross?
Yeah, I had the costumes. It was a glam rock band, yes.
Right.
Full makeup. like Alice
I-
Cooper here and black lipstick running down, kiss here. Yeah.
right.
So anyhow, yeah, she sent me a letter and said, "Hey, I think you're kind of interesting. You want to go for a coffee or a walk in the park or something?" And she'd given me her phone number, and she sent this in a letter. And I was sitting with my mom at the kitchen table. I said, "Mom, what do you think of this?" And she looked at the letter. She goes, "Oh my God, if a girl would send you a letter like that, she's really only interested in one thing." And I went, "Yeah, yeah." I picked up the phone. I dialed right away. I go, "Really? She's interested in that? Eh? Okay, well, let's give her a shout." So, anyways, apparently she was interested in that because we got married and had 4 kids. We have 5 grandchildren now. So,
Yeah, you've got a growing family. You and you made a reference back to when you coached baseball. You coached your son's team, right?
yeah, I did.
Yeah,
Both when he was first starting out, then he graduated to a sort of a better squad, Mississauga North Tigers. And
right,
the first year he was there, I didn't coach, but I was pretty vocal from the stands. And then
right,
the next year, the head coach came to me and he said, "Rick, would you like to, be on the, bench coach?" And I went, "Yeah, man, great." So I coached, and I think I did that for 2 or 3 seasons, I think. And
right,
then he graduated to the Ontario Blue Jays. He'd outgrown me by then. And in
right,
truth, this is for the benefit of any of your viewers, listeners who, maybe they get cast into a situation where you're having to coach your own kid in soccer or baseball or hockey or whatever. Don't coach your own kid. Get one of the other coaches. If you have any message you want to give to your kid, you go to another coach and you say, "Hey, I've been noticing this. Would you mention this to him?" And they go, "Yes, I can do that." And that's one of the things that coaches do for each other on youth sports. Yeah, because you can't coach your own kid. It's impossible.
been there, done that. It's a different, it's a different animal. I mean, you've got to figure out the psychology of it all, and it's different, if you're coaching guys than if you're coaching girls.
Oh yes, yeah.
I
And I
coached
had I had
girls
daughters that I
soccer for
coached.
years.
Sorry.
Girls soccer for years.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, I did
There
that
we
for.
go.
I did my daughter's team. I think I only did it for 1 year with my daughter, and I had done it as an assistant coach for 1 year with my son. Um, but yeah, and soccer's a different beast. You get in those leagues where there's guys that are, Italian guys or Spanish guys and they've been in it. They were in it when they were babies, and your coaching skills are probably going to be called into question here. When I was a teenager, I'd been coached by a Scottish guy, and that was a whole different, the Glasgow Celtic, the Rangers, that kind of stuff. So it's like,
Uh,
yeah. Anyhow,
Listen, I got to have you back because like I said, we barely scratched the surface in the book tonight. There's so much information in this book. If you didn't pick up this book either, lay it on the line. It's an excellent, excellent read. It's more of a memoir, but it ties into this book. I mean, I really see these kind of guys being kind of married in some different ways because there's different references to different guitar players and different musical references. I mean, you took me down so many different pathways and so many rabbit holes that I listened to so much music. Ed Bickert, never listened to him before. Listening to these artists that you describe, and some of them I knew. And before we go, I can't miss saying this one: The Claw.
yes. The
Jerry
Claw.
Reed. Jerry Reed.
Yes.
I
And in
mean,
fact, I was not introduced to it. I heard Lenny Bro play it first.
right.
And then I found a version of it that Chet Atkins had on a
Yep.
record called Alone.
Yeah.
And I loved that. It was just such a cool piece. And it was a big part of me. Like when I was playing in bars with Act Three, there would be local musicians. Like, for example, Basil Donovan, who went on to play in Blue Rodeo, bass in Blue Rodeo. He
Right.
went to my high school. And Basil and his pals that were in a band together, they would come to the bar where we were playing. And then Basil would be yelling up, "Hey, Rick, play The Claw. Hey, Rick, play The Clap by Steve Howe. Hey, play Mood for a Day."
Because
He
they
would.
knew you knew all that stuff.
I did. Yeah. Like I'd learned a lot of pieces because the first good guitar I'd had was a nylon string classical. It's back there. It's about the third or fourth
Right.
one along. it was the first good guitar I ever owned, and so I learned fingerstyle kinds of things. Yeah, Jerry Reed,
Yeah,
Lenny
Jerry,
Brewer.
and there's a version of Jerry Reed and Chet Atkins doing the claw together.
Is it on YouTube?
No, I think it's on a streaming service. If I can find the link, I'll send it to you.
Okay, great.
It's a great listen because they actually do harmony stuff in it.
Yeah. Oh God.
I
Wow.
know.
And
It's like
yeah.
my ears started melting when I listened to it. I'm like, this is one of the best versions of that song. And I wasn't aware of the song until you mentioned it in the book.
Yeah.
And then I went and listened to all the different versions of the claw, and that's how I found this one with Chet Atkins and Jerry Reed.
I'll give you a little taste here.
Hey Rick, I have a terrific idea.
Yeah.
We could set up Eli's Loft so you could broadcast live from there on our platform.
Yeah. Okay.
and then I could interview you and you could play stuff and we'd have studio quality sound.
Wow. Okay. Well, I'll think about it.
Because that would be a great way for you to reach your fan base too from the comfort of Eli's Loft, which would probably give a different spin and feel on the song because of the inspiration that comes from that room.
Yes, that's true. But I can tell you that, I was in a conversation with my merch guy today because, he's involved in, and he's got over 400 acts that he represents.
Oh my God.
And he was talking to me about this very thing about, you can do these things, you can set these things up and then you can stream them. And then, we can be selling merch off that's just, everybody's looking for an angle. And I'm not saying that, I'm not saying no. I'm just not saying yes.
No. All I'm saying is with a couple of tweaks, when we do an interview like this, and you want to showcase something like you just did,
yes,
people would actually hear it in more studio quality, which is kind of cool, a different edition. But hearing it raw, there, man, sounds great.
Well, thank you. That guitar is an electric guitar. I didn't even have it plugged in, but
yeah, that's a Godin, isn't it?
Yeah, this is their A6 model. I love these guitars.
Is it semi hollow or is it?
Yeah, this is like it's I think a spruce top and a mahogany back and a mahogany neck, and it's a bolt on. And my friend Mike Smith of Smitty of MJS Pickups, he designed this. Godin does this thing where they have these. You see these slide faders? It's like a preamp.
That's right. I see them.
So you're getting two pickups really. The one that's a piezo that's in under the bridge, and a magnetic one here. And I like them. And Godin they're actually thinking of doing a version. I haven't seen a prototype yet, but of Babs, they're thinking of doing their version of that. So I'm waiting to see what that'll be like. And if it goes well, and then, I guess if they sell enough of them that they're happy, we might go to some other models after that.
Let me show you something. I got something on the back wall here I want to show you. Just hang on.
Okay.
No, my son's got it in the house. He has a black Godin that looks like a Tele.
Oh yeah.
It's got active pickups in it, so you got to put batteries in it, but it is a really, really nice guitar. We found it used in Long and McQuaid's.
Uh-huh.
And it's got almost like a Tele headstock on it.
Yeah, that was probably they still have them, I think. It was an earlier version before the A6. Does it have a headstock with 6 in a line, like 6 pegs in a line, like a
6 pegs in a line?
Yep. Yeah. So this was the next generation of those, where this had a headstock where it was 3 and 3, but
3 and 3.
they're excellent guitars. And the thing is, you plug them in, and they're almost ready to go. Like you don't need to EQ them, you don't need to screw around. It's never going to feed back. It's going to just sound. Now, I like them to be a little warmer and richer. Some guys use them because they just want the strummy, but because I
Right.
play everything, single notes and jazzy kinds of things,
My
I
my
do fiddle
son
around to try and get it.
my son bought that guitar at my urging. I said, you take a look at that guitar, take a look at the action on that guitar, and see if you don't like it. And he's like, it's buttery, Dad. Like it's so buttery.
Yes.
And I
Yeah.
said, so buy it. So he went. So he
Good.
bought the
Good.
guitar. He's actually got it in his room. I was looking. It usually hangs on the wall here in the studio. That's why I was going to grab it to show you. But
Yeah.
he's got it down in his room. He bought himself a little 2i interface, so that he can jam and record his jams downstairs in his room.
Great.
And
Nice.
so he sits down there and plugs his guitar in and jams away and records different things. So it's kind of
Great.
cool.
Perfect.
It's great to see the younger generation inspired by what you do.
Yeah, well, one of the things that I did for my live shows, I don't want to start blowing my own horn too much here, but I made sure that some of the money was going to the Coalition for Music Education in Canada. And then the Redwood Theater, where I played, they have their own community outreach kind of stuff. So I, kicked some money back to them so that they could do some substantial things with youth music education. One of the unhappy things that exists in current political circumstances is that boards of education keep cutting music programs left and right.
That's right.
And, music teachers lose their jobs. They try to turn it into a part-time kind of circumstance. They don't treat it with the respect. When I was a kid going to high school, we had an orchestra, we had a stage band, we had a choir, and everybody in that collegiate institute studied music. And you got to a certain point and you had to study music theory and harmony. And it was, and I played violin for 5 years, in the orchestra.
Yeah.
Like, it was a huge part of the kind of musician that I became. I learned so much stuff about how to rehearse, how to run a good rehearsal. Reading music, all of these kinds of things. So, but most of all, I think that music allows for a kind of a mental health. It allows for people to learn how to cooperate and collaborate with others, compromise, because you got to be listening to what other people are doing.
Listening to 10 Telecaster Tales, there are some comforting aspects in the book, as well as in the tracks themselves. There's one there that's a lament, talks about loss.
Yes.
And grief and the things that happen in your life, and how, unfortunately, the way that life is, life keeps moving on. We have no choice but to move past the event. No matter how traumatic it is, we have to move past it because life moves us past it.
You can take some of it with you, because we absorb things so that we can hopefully move ourselves towards wisdom and understanding. And you can't leave things behind without acknowledging the fact that you are carrying around the memories, you're carrying around the damage, you're carrying around the loss. It's a part of what you've become. You can't let those things overwhelm your journey forward, But the making of music is something where you can go, yeah, that's right. I have this sadness inside me. I'm going to give it expression. Why does the blues exist? It exists because the slaves were going, I can't handle this life that I've got.
Right.
I need to try and express it somehow. And so that element of music that deep in its roots, most of the great classical stuff came because it's based on folk music. And folk music is there because people go, man, life is hard. life is really, really difficult to cope with. I need to have music in order to help me cope with how hard life is.
I
And
think
so all music has come from that.
yeah, and I think one of the main expressions of music is that it touches so many parts of your soul. And when I look at your musical works, some of them don't exist anymore because part of your catalog is gone.
Okay. Which ones are you referring to?
I think some of the stuff, some of your earlier solo stuff.
The first three albums, there was a merchandising company called Rock Paper Merch. I think online they're called Merch in Motion. If they
Right.
look there was a greatest hits album on vinyl that came out last year that had stuff of that. I own the rights to all those masters again, and at some point in the future, they will become available in some shape or form.
Right.
All right, can you not find them on streaming services and
Uh,
stuff?
some of them I was looking for, couldn't find them on streaming services,
Okay,
but
so that's good to know because I may resurrect those at some point for streaming because I'm just I 10 Telecaster Tales. I just did that for streaming, and the ones that I had done for my website, Bonfire Sessions, those are coming out every month for the next 4 or 5 months. There's one of those coming on, like an EP that'll have 4 or 5 or 6 songs on it, sort of grouped together. Conceptually so that they hang together a
right.
little bit. So that's going to happen. And then, we're going to get into the fall. And, as I said, the poetry book is coming out. I tend not to go back as much as I want to go forward. So, I want to write new things. I want to have new stuff. I don't want to necessarily be marketing my past,
So we
but
don't know what's in front. So I mean, the cool thing about just having things available. One of the things that I find that when people discover artists, and this is the cool thing that we've found by people discovering us, Spotify discovery mode has been, a really great thing for a lot of artists on our label. There's an artist on the label. They're from London, Ontario. They're called Brother Leeds. They wrote a song called Ashes Over New York. It just came out. You can stream it off our website or anywhere music is sold. It's called Ashes Over New York. It's got a picture of the Statue of Liberty, and the song is about 9/11, and it's about 9/11's impact and the vicarious trauma that people experience just by witnessing the event.
yes.
It's a great, well-written piece of music. It's written by Steve Sinclair, who writes in a very Gordon Downey sort of approach to his writing style.
Nice. Love that. I love Gord. So that's great.
And he was, and
that out.
Steve was a diehard hip fan. So Brother Leeds, give him a listen. And the cool thing about that is that when people started listening to their new stuff, they went, now their old catalog, which was an album and a half. It was an album and an LP before the second full-length album. We did like a waterfall release on it. And now we're getting thousands of streams on the old catalog stuff because people discovered them.
That's great. Yeah, well, I mean, the problem with me is I'm old. And so there's a very long and checkered, history. And, at one point my ass belonged to Universal. At one point it belonged to RCA.
I know.
And then some chunks of my stuff, like when you talk about Liberty Manifesto, or you talk about some of the Troops things that I did, and then all the stuff that I did, like Swing Shift and Invitations and Raw Quartet and those things.
So that
I sold that catalog to Roundhill Music. It's supposed to be up on streaming services, it's supposed to be around, but it's like I don't own that stuff anymore.
You just answered the most universal question about people owning your ass over the years. No wonder older guys have no ass. It's been owned by everybody else for so many years.
That's exactly it. That's right. It's been kicked so many times that it's just flattened right out.
That's right. My wife says that to me all the time. She said, if you didn't have hips, your pants would fall down.
Yes. Well, that's the way it goes. And plus, something's happened to my stomach. It seems to be growing, you know. So I'm losing my ass, but it's kind of moved forward and it's pushing out the front. Look, I gotta go.
I
Come
got.
on, this is
It's make,
look at the timer. It's
I know.
1:24. Oh my
I was
god.
trying to cut us off a while ago and couldn't get there.
Okay, do
Just
it
so much
now.
to talk about. We got to go. Have a great night, everybody. It's been Rik Emmett. Check out the podcast and check out his 2 books, Lay It on the Line and 10 Telecaster Tales, written on his